Controversial topics are a difficult thing to touch, especially when you're the epitome of the very thing radicals tell you to ignore when it comes to these more sensitive topics. But I feel that open mindedness and some sensibilism will lead to better things. Just because I'm a cisgender white male, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't or couldn't have an opinion. Whether or not my opinion is right or wrong is subjective, but every voice should be heard. More and more these days, we hear of people changing their genders, going from male to male, and becoming non-binary. And as always, we're going to figure out what these are before we discuss them. The definition of transgender is denoting or relating to a person whose self-identity does not conform unambiguously to conventional notions of male or female gender. So technically speaking, you could be transgender without any medical procedures at all. It's what you identify as despite your biological form. The definition of non-binary is a catch-all category for gender identities that are not exclusively masculine or feminine, identities which are thus outside of the gender binary and cis-normality, meaning basically again that despite your biological appearance, you have chosen to have no gender or to be both in different aspects, and as strange as that may sound, we need not rush to toss these aside and treat them as jokes. Now, why do people choose to change their genders? Well, that's a good question that actually has many answers. When I first heard about transgenders, I was in high school. The common statement that was used in defense of these people who changed their genders was that they were born with a male's body and a female's brain, or vice versa, and they were supposed to be male or female, so they fixed the problem. Another is that they simply chose to change their gender. A more extreme one is that they're fighting against science and biology to prove the idea of gender is oppressive. And the final one is that they changed it so they could walk into the opposite bathroom and lurk at people, and this one is absolutely ridiculous. There are literally no cases of actual people changing their gender so they could simply walk into a bathroom undisturbed and spy on people. Firstly, that would be insane, and that person would literally have changed their gender for something they can probably get away with twice before getting caught and arrested. Not worth it, and again, there are no reported cases of this at all. The problem with these kinds of myths is that it does nothing for progression. It doesn't help anyone figure out why people do what they do. All it does is drive a nail through people talking with one another. The myth was obviously made up by ignorant people who want to hate for no reason, and this only spawns more ignorance and illogical hate, and in turn, it makes these people who are trying to live their lives the way they want to hate back. Good job for that too, because this causes radicalism, extremism, and mass hate. Regardless, there are quite a few different reasons one changes their gender, and if you ask one person at a time, you'll most likely get a different answer each time, which is to be expected. When I asked a friend of mine in high school, she told me that she believed from a biblical standpoint that sometimes a male's spirit may accidentally fly into a female infant while in the womb. But this doesn't really make much sense, as if you believe in God and you've studied the Bible, that guy doesn't make mistakes, meaning from a religious standpoint that either does not make sense or God has a reason to do this to some people. Now, what classifies a male and a female? Well, aside from the obvious, there are many biological differences in male and females in every species of animal. Snakes, lions, elephants, dolphins, and human beings are all different in many ways. And the thing I find a little annoying is some of the more extreme parts of the trans community would like to remove the idea of separate genders, as though we aren't actually born with different genitalia, as though we aren't born of a different sex. And this feels a bit regressive, does it not? There are things that make us different because of gender that also bring us together. It's very well known that two males and two females cannot naturally conceive children. Duets between a man and a woman are subjectively some of the most beautiful music that I've ever heard, and though there's nothing wrong with it being the other way, trying to remove something from our lives that is biologically obvious simply because it hurts your feelings is stupid. Whether you like it or not, we're born male and female. Can you choose to change that? Well, of course you can. But acting pretentious is the worst way to gain acceptance. As I've mentioned before, humans are afraid of what they don't understand. The thought of changing your gender is still very new and strange to us, and giving us time to understand is the best approach. Forcing it down our throats and belittling people who don't understand, regardless as to whether or not they're trying to learn, is also regressive, and it only spreads a distaste for the entire thing. Am I saying that you should bend over and let us walk all over you until we learn? Well, no. But declaring yourself as superior, trying to remove biology, yelling at those who don't understand, it solves nothing. And extremism turns your cause into a joke. I don't want this for you because your cause is literally the embodiment of yourself. You're a human life, and that shouldn't be taken lightly, which is why I don't want to see this behavior from any cause. It affects us all, and if we're going to affect one another, we may as well do it the right way. Well, Barry, you may ask, how would you know anything about this? Well, I have a couple of friends who are transgender, and as soon as I met them, I only wanted to learn. What made you decide to do this? What made you this way? And it's scary as well as enlightening the things that you can hear from these people. One of them told me that she can now be exactly who she wants to be and not feel trapped and scared inside her own body anymore. And that option, that life, it's beautiful. Another came up to me one day and said, I really hate that you cisgender people label us. And as ironic as that was, this is the pretentiousness I talked about before. He didn't want to be labeled as transgender. He wanted to be called a guy, as I always did. To me, he was a guy, but to call me cisgender and then say I label you? Again, it's gonna take time. But Barry, we transgenders don't have much time. We are 50% more likely to be killed than a cisgender. And this is where it gets scary and putrid, and reminds me yet again that the human race is a disgusting race. We as people feel justified in killing those whose personal lives don't affect us at all. I don't go out on a date wondering if the person I'm out with was once a guy. If you go home to your spouse, that isn't a worrying thought for you, and seeing someone out in public that looks a bit more masculine or feminine, again, it's not something that you need to be worrying about. It's not your life, and it's not your call. They're living their lives the way that best makes them happy. Life is about doing exactly what makes you, as an individual, happy, regardless as to what anyone else says or thinks. The fact that some people out there have the audacity to look at these people and let it affect them in such a way that they're willing to murder, it's disgusting. But they're disgusting, and you know what? You can think that. You can view them as anything you want. You can think of them as a girl, a guy, an it, a they. That's totally fine, because your opinion doesn't and shouldn't matter at all when it comes to how others live their lives. And if you're bothered so much by how someone else is getting by, you have a bigger problem than they do. Now, I did say that there was a certain aspect to this that I disliked, and I wasn't referring to the radicalistic whole. I was mostly referring to non-binary. Now, I have nothing against non-binary in itself, but the cause that these people want to put forth is just as harmful as those killing others for no reason. Now, not all non-binary people are like this. However, the main idea is that we're born genderless, but because of science, we're forced to believe that we're one or the other, and apparently, this is misogyny, patriarchy, oppression, and the idea is just extreme. See, just the same way that cisgenders should not be worrying about how transgenders live their lives the way they do, the same way nobody should try to tell me that I'm being brainwashed and oppressed because someone called me a guy. There's so many things wrong with this when it comes to other arguments used by the same people. Specifically, that men are misogynistic pigs and we're all privileged oppressors. If you believe that, but you also believe that I technically shouldn't have a gender, then that doesn't make sense. If you get mad at people for calling you a girl or a guy out of mistake, and you scream at them for it, and then you yourself use gender to harmonize with a parallel belief, that doesn't make sense. And the fact that you hate science so much for telling you what species of human you are and what gender you are does not make sense, for it was through science that you're able to get hormone shots and be who you want to be. Live the way you wish to live. Only because of modern science can you even have a choice to modify your body and become anything and anyone you want, and it's illogical. Again, I hate radicalism, but in this case, I hate it even more when a cause is turned into a joke, and I'm saddened. Especially when it's a decent cause, but your cause is literally yourself. You as a human being, everything you are, and all of your potential, and you're wasting your mind on this. And even more detrimental is that the very thing you love, the very thing that you're passionate about, that outwardly makes you you, the choice you've made and the way in which you've chosen to live your life, you're making that very thing a joke. And it breaks my heart. Not only because of the amazing potential that you're wasting, but because you're proactively giving people reasons to hate the thing you stand for, and we shouldn't have that negative effect. Science works the way it does despite your feelings, and it won't change. You can accept that just as we can learn to understand and accept you for who you've decided to be. Everything is person to person. There will be those out there who continue to hate because they can, continue to tell you that you're a waste of flesh, and that you living the way you do is putrid. But there are others who will accept you as the human being that you've chosen to be, regardless of your color, your gender, what it is now and what it was before, even if you forget to mention it on the first date. Seriously though, that's a bit of information we'd kind of like to know from the get-go. But we're all human, and we need to realize that. And as for those out there who believe that gender is a myth, a scam, and a constitution of oppression. If gender doesn't matter, why would you even change yours?